Hazer listeners, Love is Blind. Let's check it out.
Do something with you.
I need you to be as honest as you possibly can be.
Yesterday, when I ended things, I've heard that you had a pretty emotional reaction to our breakup.
Yeah, it was tough.
Then I was like, fuck, he cares.
Of course I care.
Okay, so on one hand, you didn't realize he cared. That's weird and doesn't sound believable. Sounds like an excuse, a convenient excuse. On the other hand, she did seem to be surprised when Izzy informed her that he did have emotion about it. And you saw physically, she's like, oh. And the way I interpreted that was that it was kind of new information. Given my conceptualization of Johnie, it's possible that a part of her defensive structure of suppressing her pain and sadness, and by finding other ways to manage it and distract herself, she lumps everyone's pain into the same suppressed bucket and has a hard, people will do that sometimes. Because empathy has a lot to do with your ability to feel your own feelings. The ability to have compassion is a big part of it, a huge factor in your ability to feel empathy and to exhibit empathy and to understand and to communicate that you care has to do with you being able to feel your own emotions. Also, when other people are feeling things, we as social animals will feel them as well, depending. But there's a lot of neuroscience involved in this regarding not only just emotion, but even just movement. We have conducted studies, some ethical, some not ethical, on humans and animals that demonstrate that even without moving, if we watch someone else doing something and we're relating to them or identifying with them, or we're worried about them or something, our brain, our motor center, or the parts of our brain that are involved in movement will start to fire even though we are not moving, because we're visualizing or feeling the movement in our own brain. We actually use this in sports. I remember when I played basketball as a kid in high school, there was research that came out that when you visualize taking a free throw and making it, then you get better at actually shooting free throws. You need to practice shooting free throws, but if you also visualize the movement and visualize the basket going, the ball going in, there's a lot of research in that area that visualization can be an effective way of practicing something even though you didn't physically practice it. It all kind of points in the direction that we have the ability, when we have the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, not just intellectually, but physically and emotionally, then it provokes a feeling or a vibe inside of us because we are interpreting what it would be like to be in there, and we're literally feeling what they're feeling, maybe a smaller version of it. And then as we feel it, whether it registers consciously or not to us, then we are able to be alerted to their feeling. You can see the markers of emotion to someone else, but it's another thing to actually be feeling a version of that feeling, at least the perceived feeling. Empathy isn't always accurate is the thing, is what I'm saying, but it is the main way in which we can assess how other people are feeling. Therapists, a certain brand of therapists like myself, do this all the time. A part of our assessment of clients is to take note of how I feel and the impulses that I have, as a way of not just getting to know me and making sure that my countertransference is noticed and managed, but also as a way of gauging what is going on inside of the person. There are sub-perceptual communications that are happening between me and the client, and also observations that are kind of out of my awareness, but are physical things that are happening. It's not a magical process. It's not supernatural. It's picking up on tone of voice or the way that people move. And I am subconsciously empathizing, and then I have a subconscious reaction to that, but then I notice the feeling because I pay attention to those things. I'm trained to do that. And then I say, oh, I'm feeling right now this feeling, so that might say something about the client, or maybe it does, or maybe I'm just having an emotion independent. There's an exploration there. So when, for Johnie, if she has cut herself off sufficiently from pain and sadness and demoralization and hurt and the feelings of rejection for whatever reason, then you might actually have a very hard time imagining, especially without any visual cues, because he was talking and remember he started to cry, but we could see the visual information of him crying. She couldn't. And there's a chance there was nothing coming through the wall that indicated he was crying. Now, you would imagine that other people would intuit that some pain was there, whether crying was there or not. But without that information and with the inability to feel one's own pain, then she might have a very low likelihood of knowing that other people are in pain. It could even be threatening to her to have that empathy because it could trigger her own pain that she might be avoiding. I'm basing this on almost no information. There's a good chance that in the next scene, all this will be thrown out the window, this conceptualization. I'm just using it as a jumping off point to talk about psychology and humans.
Ultimately, reflecting back on all of this, I'm wondering if I repeated a pattern with Izzy.
Yeah. But for me, watching, and I'm guessing for Chris, you'd want to hear a lot more about that because the way it looks is since you got dumped, you have now decided to change your mind, which isn't what we would call true love. And thus Chris should be afraid or distrustful or rejected or something. So there's that. But there's a version of this story where her attraction to Chris or wanting to give Chris a chance is legit. And what she said, I was wondering about as well, that she might have realized, no, I thought that the Chris option was me on the old pattern, but I actually was still in the pattern. I was deluding myself by actually rejecting Chris and wanting to be with Izzy. With Chris, I actually feel more vulnerable with, but I was tricking myself into believing that was easy because it was easier for me to avoid. There's also another possibility that so a lot of arrows are pointing in the direction that Johnie doesn't have a firm connection with herself, in that you need to feel your feelings. It's talking about that also earlier about the pain thing, but it might just be herself in general, and that she's drifting, trying to, the way that I describe it is, a clock is, this is a common idiom, but a broken clock is correct twice a day, right? So with people that are disconnected from their emotions because they weren't attuned to enough or they were abused growing up and they've never developed that sense of who they are and what's going on with them and what their needs are, there are needs that are wanting to be met, attachments and security and anger and justice and all the things, but they aren't. It's a vague voice in the back of their soul that is trying to get through, but they can't really decipher it. But they know something's going on, and they feel the effects of their needs not being met, the depression, the sadness. They feel something, but they don't know what is causing it, and they don't even know they don't know because we don't talk about this enough. And then they end up doing things to try to meet the distant voices, but because they aren't precise about the meeting of those needs, they frequently will not meet their needs, but occasionally they will because a broken clock is correct twice a day because they're just throwing a lot at the wall, and occasionally they get it right. But in order to be in a relationship, a romantic relationship, in order to date well, in order to navigate all those early relationship issues well, you have to have a pretty robust connection, neuronal connection, awareness connection with who you are, what you're feeling, and what your needs are. Like, for example, in my relationship with Stacy, if I felt distant one day, I would have, that need, that deficit, loneliness is happening, and a lack of connection is happening, and fear or pain or loss is happening for me in my gut, and I feel it, right? It registers as an urge or a longing or something, or a thought like, ooh, we should have date night tonight or something. And I can work backwards from there and go, I must be missing her or something, And in order to have those things pop into my head and to be able to check in with myself and say, oh yeah, I probably, it's not an intellectual thing like, oh, we haven't had date night in 3 weeks. It wouldn't be that. It'd be checking in with my emotions, my needs. Where am I? Who am I? What do I want? What do I need? And then I would say, yeah, I guess I do need that. And then I would have to go to her and ask for it in a way that wasn't tentative, in a way that allowed for her to have freedom, but was communicating to her, not like, hey, maybe we should have date night sometime. I would say, hey, I miss you. Let's have date night, or hey, I feel disconnected, not because of you, but because I've been working too much. So maybe we should have date night. All of that system is a product of me being in connection neuronally with my emotions and how I feel and what my needs are. It's complicated, And then let's say that she's busy and she's like, I can't tonight. So then I have to notice my feeling of hurt, but I also have to have empathy for her situation, right? I can't just be in my own shoes. I have to simultaneously be in her shoes. And as she's communicating those things to me, I have to imagine where that's coming from. Let's say she's kind of short with me. She says, I'm really busy. It's just really hard. Okay. So I have to be able to be in her shoes and know that maybe she's saying that because she's generally under pressure. I don't know. I'm just making up a story. So there's a lot of issues that come up, second by second, that have to be navigated well enough. And it largely depends on your ability to know what your needs are and emotions, and also be able to mentalize and interpret other people's emotions well enough, because so much misunderstanding can happen. And so for her, there's a lot of things pointing to, the flightiness could be attributed to not knowing who she is and what she wants and how she feels. The flightiness we're seeing with Izzy and with Chris, it's in terms of the edit, the lack of acknowledgement of her pain when she's being dumped and it's really hard for her. Or she actually doesn't feel that much pain because she was randomly just choosing Izzy because she thought maybe that was best, but wasn't really checking in with what her needs are and what she wants. To be in love with someone, you have to be in connection with those emotions. I've had clients before who have had this, we call it a disconnection with the self, but I call it a disconnection with, what do I call it? The phrase in clinically is a lack of self, they will say, a lack of self. But I don't like that, because that implies that they literally have no self. They do have a self, it's just a disconnection. So I call it a lack of connection with the self. So when I have a client that has a pretty good dose of this, and usually it's because of trauma growing up, abuse, but also it can just be parents who just weren't very emotionally attuned. You could have had a really good life on paper, but when you were 0 to 5, your parents just weren't there helping you to interpret your emotions. They might have been working too much, or they might have had lack of attunement from their own parents or something. Anyway, so I've had clients like this. Usually they have abuse as a child, and they don't know that they have a disconnection with the self. But when I describe it to them, they're like, oh my God, yes, that's me, usually. And then we set out to get in connection with the self, and it has to do with me asking them repeatedly, what do you feel? What do you want? What do you need? What's going on with you? And for the first couple years, through those explorations, there might not be very much of an answer. There might be anxiety that they can't see it, but I help them with that. I say, it's down there. There's stuff down there. You just can't see it. It looks like a dark abyss, like you're nothing and you're broken, but you're not. It's down there. We just have to get you in connection with that. And then once you're in connection with that, you'll feel grounded. It can feel like a very untethered feeling to not know who you are and not know what you are, not know what you feel. And so anyway, once we get to that point where they actually, and it's more complicated than I'm describing it. It's pretty deep psychotherapy, but I'm describing it in simplistic terms to save time. Anyway, 2 or 3 years into it, they might start getting connected with their feelings. Let's say that they're married. Well, there's a chance that they discover over time themselves that they are not in love with their partner. In fact, they've never really been in love because they were never in connection with their feelings. They were down there, but in order to be in love, in order to be attracted to someone, in order to choose a partner that you want to meet your needs, you have to be in connection with your own needs. So, this fictional client might have chosen someone that seemingly was the right choice, and maybe there was a lot of outside influence, like, oh yeah, and he's got a good job and he treats you right, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, right? And then once you get in connection with the self, you realize, no, I'm not in love with this person. Well, now what? No, I don't want to be this. I've worked so hard to have this career, but I don't want this career. This is not, I'm starting to know my needs, and my needs do not involve these things. I think they involve a whole other set of things. How scary is that? And yeah, it is scary. It doesn't always result in that. And sometimes people can have those initial feelings, but then eventually come back around to their partner and their career, or use what they can use within those, or change what they can change in those areas to meet their needs. A lot of things are kind of pointing in that direction for Johnie. I'll say there are some slight indications of data that are in the column of that speculative conceptualization.
Because I tend to go for people who are emotionally unavailable. I've never really had like a secure relationship.
But are you ready for a switch?
Okay, that's reassuring to me as an audience, because I care about them, particularly Chris, because he fosters dogs on the weekend. So that is believable. So she's saying, I usually go for emotionally unavailable, and yeah, that's how I would describe. That's why it was kind of weird that she was going for Izzy, really, or at the very least not going for Chris. And she's saying that, okay. And maybe with her history of being with people with addictions, they can sometimes, depending, have a vibe of lack of availability emotionally or otherwise because they're wrapped up in their addiction, right? So maybe she finally figured it out. So maybe Chris is the answer. I don't know. I kind of hope that to be true, honestly.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. You're like the safe choice, telling me everything I need to hear and makes me feel so secure. But in some ways, that's less exciting.
Okay, I don't know what she means by that, but I'll just speculate because I've treated people, and you've heard this probably in pop culture anyway, that some people are attracted to drama, or they're attracted to the wrong person. They date and they find someone that is healthy and good for them, but it's not exciting, it's boring. And then they are very compulsively, romantically, and sexually attracted to the bad boy in the neighborhood or whatever. Those kinds of stories. You've heard them, I'm guessing. And yeah, there is an observation of that sometimes. It depends on what we're talking about, though. Sometimes it's just bad luck. And yeah, on paper, this other person was better for you, I guess, but it wasn't the fact that he was good for you that you weren't attracted to him. You just weren't attracted to him. To find both of those things, like both good for you and you're attracted to them, that's sort of the magic combo. And sometimes it takes a while to find someone with both of those, right? So it could just be that. But another part of it is that for some people, based on their histories, they're trying to recreate a relationship that they had when they were young in which there was emotional deprivation or harm, and they aren't ready to move on from that. They're in a compulsive recreation of that past relationship because they need that more than they need romance, more than they need a stable relationship. In a nutshell, when we go through difficulty when we're young, say she had an emotionally unavailable or a flighty person that came in and out of her life that would abandon her and would be there, that kind of thing, or surface relationship, some kind of pain when she was young, and she has never recovered from that. So that relationship has been internalized, not only as a template for relationships, but also because the self tries to work things out. When we're going through difficulty, we mull things over because we're trying to resolve them so it doesn't happen again. And one of the ways we do that is we kind of take it all in and we mull it over. And part of that is taking in the other person as well, taking in our vision of them. This is all in object relations. I'm describing it a particular way for simplicity's sake. But anyway, you can listen to all my lectures on introjection and projective identification and all that stuff. It's internalization. It's a powerful model that I use all the time, and especially when it plays out systemically with multiple people. But anyway, because everyone's doing it. But anyway, so we internalize that relationship, and as a way of trying to work it out, we might recreate it because our subconscious wants it to go differently this time. We're like, okay, we still have this problem with this relationship that we internalize, so we need to work it out. We need to solve it. Well, how about we recreate it subconsciously? I'll find someone that matches one side of this dyad, and this time it'll go well for us, and then we can feel okay, and then we can be resolved. This is all subconscious, by the way. And then we recreate it, but because we're so good at recreating it, we recreate it and it goes badly just like it did before, and then we're compounding that problem for us, which causes us the need to recreate it again. That is one of the explanations or models of understanding why someone would be attracted to the wrong person frequently. And then when they come across someone that doesn't fit with that template, their innards might want to be with that person. There might be a lot of desperation to be with the Chris's of the world, but they are still trying to work out that past relationship. That's priority number one. And this is why therapy and awareness and corrective experiences are very important, because when you do that, then people tend to forego that compulsion of recreation and are free to fall in love legitimately. Now, if Johnie is doing that and she were a client of mine, I would not interpret Chris as necessarily the right person, because if Johnie is still in that pathology, then she has yet to free herself such that she could evaluate whether or not she's in love with someone or not, whether or not she's attracted to someone or not. Just because someone is the boring choice doesn't mean it's necessarily the right choice. It might be, but until she heals and is aware of all these things, there's a good possibility she wouldn't know if she should be with someone or not. You know what I mean? So I think there's also a possibility of that happening.
I am excited to hear your voice every time, and it kind of hurts hearing that you don't think I am exciting.
No, it's like, it's different. Like,
I don't want to be just like a secure pick. I want to be what you're excited for every day. And I mean, I want to be the love of.
Yeah. Chris is, first we had Marshall and then we had Chris. Now, Marshall had an issue as well. He apologized for it, but the whole, you're a project of mine kind of thing. But I guess there's frequently someone that I'm very impressed by, and Chris I'm very impressed by. So he's being assertive and saying, well, you get the sense that he's just really in love with her. And because he said earlier, I don't think I included it, he's just like, I think intellectually this isn't a good idea that I'm being open to her, but I can't help it. That feeling of just being in love, he's like, this isn't, but I'll do it. Fine. I'll do anything she wants, that kind of thing. And then he's in the room with her and he's saying, hey, that doesn't feel good. I don't want you to think of me as boring. I want you to be excited about me. So let's see what she says here. And again, she's exhibiting empathy right now as he's describing, and he's not being super explicit, but you can see that it's registering to her. She's feeling his pain, which is a good sign.
You're cute with your mouth full.
sorry. That's probably disgusting.
Yeah, if I were a little birdie on Chris's shoulder, I would say I would wait until you have a very firm indication that she is into you sufficiently for you to take the risk of proposing to her. Maybe even, what would you do? Because on one hand, you would want to alert Johnie, be like, hey, you might want to prove to me, but then if you alert Johnie, then that might get her to manufacture something, right? So at the very least, the landscape is that Johnie dumped him, and is wanting him back. So if she really, really wants him back, and we've seen these scenes before, then she would at least fight for Chris as much as she was fighting for Izzy. She was fighting for Izzy. She was, bringing out the bullet points, saying, hey, I'm trying to convince you, and no, and I, lots of effort and all guns ablazing. And we are not seeing that with Chris, at least not in the edit. So, yeah.
I want to be with you.
I want to point out that I think that the editors manipulated the edit and are trying to manipulate us with a little insertion of her smiling, which I doubt actually happened. It could have, but I doubt. Let's rewind that. You see that? It could have happened, but I doubt it, especially when you consider the way her face looks soon after this.
To be with you.
It's possible, but I doubt it. So we have to consider the distinct possibility, because of course they're looking for a villain, right? They need a villain. They always need a villain on these shows. And after talking with one of what I call producers, but what her official position was something different than that. And I don't even think I should be saying exactly, because I don't want to out her. And she wasn't concerned about being outed. She wasn't telling me secrets or anything. I don't know. I just don't want to get her in trouble with an NDA or something. And of all the things that she was saying, I walked away with the knowledge that the manipulation to us as an audience can happen at various different stages, because there's so many different people involved in making this show. You have the people on the ground who are actually interacting with the cast members. They obviously have a lot of sway on what's happening. They can influence things. They can ask a lot of questions. They can maybe even suggest things like, hey, maybe, what about Chris? Are you thinking about maybe going back to him? I don't know. He seems like a nice guy. Those kinds of things. I mean, I don't think they go that far, but maybe. So there's that level of influence. Then you have these people after the show has been shot who are, and during the show is being shot, and after, you have these people who are in charge of the story. And that sounds funny because it's like, it's not scripted, right? But we understand it's slightly influenced and slightly scripted, particularly other shows. But they use the word story, I think. They're trying to say, well, yeah, it's reality, and we're trying to capture reality, but we're also trying to tell a story similar to a documentary, right? If you make a documentary about like with Hoop Dreams, with two high school basketball kids, you don't say, look, we're just going to shoot and throw it up on the screen. No, you think, okay, what's the story here? Journalists don't just show up on the scene and just report the facts. They're like, there's got to be a narrative, because otherwise it won't grab people. What point are we trying to make? So there's that influence. And there's a number of people involved in that. Like, there are multiple producing teams working with different people, because there's so many people, right? So you have a lot of people who are, like with Johnie, she might have a different storyteller and set of producers than he does, than Chris does. There might be a different team with different ideas about what the story might be. And there's a lot of conversations. And of course, the showrunner is in charge of everything. And they have meetings with all those people and go over like what happened during the day and then later on, the editors get involved. And the editors could completely diverge from the story, because a different story might be determined by the editor's team or their bosses, or the showrunner might, in the edit room, discover that story that we thought it's not really working. Let's go this direction. So you can have a lot of ethical reality TV show making, and then in the editing room, someone could either just decide to do something because they want to, or one of their bosses decides we need more oomph. Or another thing that she said was, there are people above the showrunner. There are people like Netflix, like an executive might say, ratings were down last time, so whatever you got to do, you got to gussy up something here. You got to make something. And then in the editing room, they might say like, hey, like the showrunner might be pushing back against Netflix, saying we don't want to manipulate in the edit, but the Netflix people might be saying, you got to do it or else, that kind of thing. There's a lot of corporate meetings and discussions. So who knows, but there could have been one person or a set of people, who knows, who inserted that little scene because in their eyes, they're like, we need an oomph. And she has emerged as the baddie of this season. And because you need a baddie, because, right, I mean, who else do we have? I mean, I guess you have Lydia, but she's not like a baddie. She's just, she has the potential. I think, because we don't usually see the baddies emerge until the honeymoon and after the pods. That's usually when the real triggering begins, right? And I could see Lydia, and I could see Johnie. I could see Stacy, maybe, but yeah, I maybe I don't know, maybe Uche, honestly. So, but that's not strong. But yeah, definitely Lydia and Johnie are top, and Stacy, I guess. Is it sexist for me to have it undefined? Because JP seems, I guess, pretty level-headed. I will say that when JP and Taylor met in the hallway, it was very awkward. Primarily, I think, because Taylor was pretty nervous, but mainly because JP wasn't saying anything. He was just, he's not a super extroverted, gregarious sort of dude, and so I think he's saying all the right things, but he wasn't saying much. And Taylor kept being like, "Oh, this is kind of weird," and I think she was trying to get something going, but he just was like, like he was just responding to things she was saying, and so I kind of worry about them. But I'm guessing once they're on a honeymoon and he calms down, things will. I hope. I don't know. I'm pulling for those two at this point. Anyway. So they could have inserted that little scene because they're like, we need a villain, and now is the time, because this is the scene where she seems like the reality of the moment was they could have people watching this in time and they'd be like, this looks a little shady what she's doing, and then later on they're like, let's amplify that shadiness with that smile. I don't know. What do you think? Sorry, I'm yammering. Because imagine the psychopathy involved if that smile means what I think the editors were trying to make it mean for us. That she is like, especially with the ominous music, that she's just like, yeah, I'm going to trick this MFer and he's not going to know what hit him. He's just like a little toy in the palm of my hand. I mean, it's possible, but not likely.
Same.
I want to be with you. I want you.
I feel bad for Chris. You can sense the discomfort and he's just like, oh, I want you. I hear him, I think, in his brain going, but I shouldn't. This isn't good. But I do. Yeah. And, maybe once they meet, there will be a spark and things will go well and she'll get therapy and figure it all out and everything will be fine. I don't know. I always just hope that things work out for people.
In ways I didn't even know I cared about you. I'm gonna have to think about it.
In terms of the edit, we didn't see a lot of fighting on her part. If I were in her shoes and I truly did want to be with Chris, which is a question mark about Johnie, then there'd just be so much more, and it was edited, but there'd just be so much more communicated about just like, I'm so sorry, and please take me back, and I want to be with you. I understand if you don't want to be with me, but I made a mistake, and here's what's in my heart. I feel these feelings for something inspirational, something to grab onto. And then they show her leaving, and he's still in there. Did she think he left? I hope he doesn't propose in this moment. Kind of had that look. That's usually what happens. They stand in front of the wall and they start to propose. So wait, well, let's rewind. Did they communicate? Because it kind of sounded like he was leaving. I mean, yeah, he did say, I need to think about it. So she could have interpreted that as he was, and then she might have heard him stand up. So she might have interpreted, oh, he's leaving. And of course, all this could be manipulated. They could do a split screen, but I don't know, it doesn't seem likely that they did that. I hope he doesn't start proposing. Okay, so he was just standing before he walked out. All right.
So she couldn't see herself like that with you. So was that.
She literally told me basically the same thing, but opposite.
That's not a good sign.
Because she told me the reason she felt better with you was because I was like the safe thing, and she's not used to that.
Well, I mean, from what I saw, there were some similarities in terms of the messaging, but the story was consistent-ish, right? She was saying that Chris was always the safer one and the one that she felt safer with, but that she was bored with, and that Izzy she felt insecure with, but he was worth pursuing. She didn't word it this way, but I think she meant that she believed that Izzy and her would have a deeper, more vulnerable, more real relationship, one worth fighting for, one worth taking the risk for. Whereas with Chris, she knew that he would just sort of be there and it would be casual and easy, but not really important and not deep and not risky. So she did basically say that to both people, but she was saying things that could be argued as manipulative, and that she was saying to Izzy, no, you're the one and Chris isn't the one, because I know that to be true. Chris, right. So the thing that she did say to both of them was, normally I'd go for the Chris's of the world, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go for you, Izzy. And then when Izzy broke up with her, she goes to Chris and she says, my normal pattern is to go for someone like Izzy, and I want to be with you. Now, it could be argued that it's not a manipulation, and it was a discovery, as I was talking about earlier, that she thought she was breaking pattern by going for Izzy, but she might have been subconsciously just continuing with the pattern, and she now realizes that even though Izzy doesn't look exactly like, he doesn't have some of the markers of what she usually goes for dysfunctionally, it had enough of the vibe there, and now she realizes, the emotional unavailability, that kind of thing. But and unless she very quickly makes a lot of self-discovery, at the very least, she's deluding herself, right? And at worst, she's just making stuff up so that she can either be on the show or out of desperation of just wanting to be with somebody. You could have someone on the show who knows in their mind, I'm not really into this, but I do not want to be alone. I don't want to leave here alone. I need to be with somebody. Not because they're on a reality TV show, just because they're just that desperation. She's, I think, indicated signs of that, even as she talked about. I think she might even think that might be a problem of hers. But yeah, if you're Chris, there's a lot of reasons to be tentative. At the very least, if you're Chris, you could say, well, in his head, he would say, I'll propose and we'll see how it goes. And if it goes well, then, we'll get married at the altar. But if I'm not feeling it, then, but it's worth me taking that leap and taking that chance. You could see someone making that choice.
He's used to more excitement rather than the safe direction, because she hasn't had the safe direction before.
She said she hasn't had safe.
She hasn't had safe before.
And see,
so now that hearing you say the exact flip is not
good,
and
that's the thing. Like she said with Chris, she's like, we hit it off. We're laughing all the time, and she's like, I can picture a life.
But also, I don't know. I guess I just always hope that everything's going to work out. But yeah, if I had a friend like Chris come to me, I would say, because we get, at least for me, I get kind of wrapped up in the Love is Blind format, but you don't have to get engaged and get married to someone. You don't have to take that much of a leap of faith. It shouldn't really be that much of a leap of faith. You shouldn't have to leap that far. So if a friend of mine said, I was going to propose to this woman, but now this is happening, what do? I'd be like, yeah, no. What? Do not propose. I mean, if you want to date a little longer and see what happens, I guess. But yeah, do not commit. I hear it in your voice. When you get engaged, you should be sure of that. You should have a lot of data to base on to base that decision on it. It's a huge decision.
This person to spend the rest of my life with them. You don't have to propose to anybody.
Yeah, 100%.
Have those important conversations before you bring somebody else's emotions into it.
I don't like to talk. I don't talk about these things.
Just don't make it weird.
I just prefer people like not
You're
harass
right.
me on this.
You're completely right. We'll drop it.
Thank you.
Drop it.
Okay, that looked edited, including that shaking of the head. Who knows? But at least we're seeing a snippet of Milton exhibiting what he was talking about, I think, because in the pods, we see a version of Milton that was pretty open, emotional, and willing to have difficult conversations and being expressive, at least to some extent. And he referred to how he normally isn't. And I was wondering, it didn't really resonate with me because he didn't seem like someone that was closed off. I mean, I took his word for it, but I was having a hard time visualizing it. But we just saw a bit where that might be his default mode. And yeah, I wonder if Milton and Lydia end up together, I wonder how that's going to play out. As I said before, it could be managed. There would have to be some system that they work out, because it'd be a stretch to think that Milton would be able to meet Lydia and vice versa. There'd have to be a system for them to be able to work that out. But you could absolutely see that going down a conflictual road, a road of misunderstanding and annoyance with each other. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself, truly, because you deserve it. You truly do.